Hi, my name is Elisa Tobin, and this is my older adult oral video presentation for SW 501 at Widener University. For this project, I had the privilege of interviewing a 77-year-old woman at my church whom I have known for about 9 years. And to protect her identity, for the purpose of this project, I am going to refer to her as Lila, and I will refer to her husband as Paul. Paul and Lila have been married for about 50 years. They have 2 grown children, and they have 4 grandchildren. And for this presentation, I decided to focus on this developmental stage that she is currently in, which is older adulthood. And I chose this because in the last few years, she has had a lot of trials that she has had to work through, and those have affected how she lives her life and what she does every day. So to introduce to you the developmental stage of older adulthood, I want to talk about the difference between chronological age and functional age. So chronological age would be the age in years. So for Lila, she is 77 years old. So chronological age would be 77. And then her functional age would be measured by how well she performs. And it would be how well she performs ADLs and IADLs. And what ADLs stand for are activities of daily living. And these are personal care activities. So it would be hygiene and the way that they take care of themselves. Those make up the ADLs. And instrumental ADLs, or instrumental activities of daily living, are related to independent living. So it would be housework and shopping and money management, just things like that that are related to living independently as a functioning older adult. So with older adulthood come physical changes and cognitive changes. So some of the physical changes that occur as an older adult are muscle and bone mass changes, arthritis, age spots, wrinkles, gray hair, loose skin, dental problems, vision and hearing, and slower reaction time and less coordination. And with vision, that can be glaucoma, macular degeneration, and cataracts. Another thing that can happen in older adulthood is weight gain. And with dental problems, it could be the loss of teeth because of the resuscitation of the gum line. And then with bone mass, something that occurs is osteoporosis, which is weak bones. And unfortunately, caffeine may increase these risks, which is bad for me because I am a big coffee drinker. With physical changes, also there are cognitive changes, and some of these are memory. So it would be dementia and Alzheimer's, which Alzheimer's is just a different form of dementia. And one of the things that the book talked about was the use it or lose it. And they said that the more that you use your memory, the more chance of keeping those memories that you will have. And then other cognitive changes are sometimes personality changes over time. And as adults get older, their personality can change. And then they can also develop depression because this is a time that they're looking back on their lives and they're asking themselves what if they did good enough or if they could have done something different. And so sometimes depression can come, and it can come also because they might not have family and friends around to help them work through life's struggles. So some of the important experiences that happened in Lila's life as an older adult were navigating the transition to life without her parents and her in-laws. And she lost her parents and in-laws right during the transition into older adulthood from middle adulthood. And so she was just trying to function without them. And she was very close with her mother. And she was also very close with her mother-in-law. And so those were 2 very big losses in her life. Another thing that has been very important and instrumental in Lila's life as an older adult is grandparenting. She has 4 grandchildren, and they are all within an hour of where she lives. And so she loves being able to spend time with them, whether it was babysitting them when they were younger or attending their games, whether it's swimming or football, or she has a couple grandsons who were wrestlers, or just whatever it is, whatever their activities are, she loves to be there to watch them and to support them. And then also retirement. And I have retirement in air quotes because she really didn't retire. She has transitioned to volunteering or also less hours with her work, but she doesn't really retire because she hasn't ever really stopped doing what she is doing, and she hasn't ever let her age or her disabilities that I will talk about later on, she's never let that impact what she does every day, and she tends to function very well despite whatever she's going through. So some of the challenges that she has faced, actually the biggest challenge that she has faced, is the loss of her oldest grandson. And 2 years ago, her grandson was in an awful accident out of the country. He was studying abroad and was mugged, and he was thrown off a bridge. And so Lila was faced with this grief, this intense grief that she had over losing her oldest grandson. And one of the things that she faced with this was just going through the loss as a grandparent, but also as a parent. And one of the things that I found in my research for my bibliography was an article about grieving grandparents. And the article focused on grandparents who were grieving the loss of their younger grandchildren. And even though her grandchild was older, it was still a process that she had to go through. And this was a quote from that article, and it says, "Unlike bereaved parents, bereaved grandparents rarely receive attention and help from healthcare providers, family, and friends." And so to talk about this a little more, I want to just show the model of death and dying and the grieving that she has had to deal with. So the grieving process starts with denial and moves to anger and bargaining and depression, and then finally acceptance. And as I've known her and been close to her for the 9 years, I was able to watch her and walk with her through each of these phases of grief. And one of the things that she mentioned as we were talking was the grief as a parent, and to watch her daughter, who is her grandson's mom, to watch her walk through losing her son was just one of the hardest things that she's ever had to do. And then it was also hard because she had her other son, or her son, who was also grieving because it was his nephew. And she mentioned that when they found out, they called their son to tell him, and he just said, "Well, you're kidding, Mom. That can't be true. It can't be him. That can't be true." And they had to say, "Yes, it is true." And then they had to walk through that grief process with them while they were dealing with their own grief. And then another thing was just returning to normalcy and functioning without their oldest grandson, and as they move through this grief process. And then right after, it was only a couple months after their grandson passed away, she broke her hip, and she was in the hospital. She had to have surgery, and then she was in some physical therapy for a couple months. And one of the things that she said was that it was a blessing that she broke her hip, because she was able to take focus off of her grief, and it was able to put focus on something else, and something else that she had to deal with. And then another thing is her husband. Her husband has had some health challenges in the past few years as he's gotten older, and he's been faced with his own health challenges as well as Lila has. So the psychosocial crisis that she is in right now is integrity versus despair. And in this time, it's a reflection of life and an inventory of successes. So what integrity is satisfaction with the accomplishments that she has been able to achieve. And it deals with well-being and peace and a sense of fulfillment. And then despair is the dissatisfaction with where life ended up. So it's mourning for lost opportunities. And so this stage that she's in is a battle between the satisfaction and dissatisfaction. And for Lila, she really has had a sense of fulfillment in her life. And we're going to look at a few different ways that she has seen this sense of fulfillment. So the first thing is diversity and difference. And the most important thing in her life is her Christian faith. And everything that she does is for her family and for church. And she is rooted in her Christian faith so deeply that she has been able to have peace, even in the hard times, such as losing her grandson, or losing her parents, or losing her in-laws, or dealing with her own physical ailments, or her husband Paul's physical ailments. And then another thing that has contributed to this sense of fulfillment is her work ethic. And like I mentioned before, she's never stopped working or volunteering. She's never let anything stop her from what she wants to achieve. And she mentioned that as she was growing up, her parents always said, do what you want to do and don't let anybody stop you. And she has held on to that for a very long time, and she will hold on to it for the rest of her life. And then also just her viewpoint about life. Lila fights for people, and one of the things that I have the privilege of working with her on is developing a program for special needs children in our church so that they can come and be integrated in the Sunday school programs and in the church as a whole. And she really fights for people from all different stages of life. And she has a lack of entitlement. She doesn't feel like she has deserved anything that she has received, but she just feels grateful for the life that she has. And she feels grateful for the people who are in her life and for her family. And then finally, it's her optimism. And I read another study for the bibliography that studied optimism versus pessimism. And one of the things they mentioned about optimism was that the opportunities and constraints to overcome stressors could determine the value of optimism. And she has had this optimism for her whole entire life. And I think that because of the optimism, she is able to overcome the stressors that come in her life. But sometimes it's still hard to overcome those, and it's so hard to work through those because you're still grieving. But for Lila, she's able to still have optimism, even in times of grief and hardship.